Well, the conundrum that is the retirement age is the central question tonight. One case that refuses to go away and throws the entire institution into a spin.
How that case is dispensed with will determine just how Kenyans will perceive the once most trusted institution in the country, the Supreme Court, which now is swimming in dirty waters.
Indeed, now this is your home for absolute fair comment, context, and opinion. Good evening. My name is James Smart.
Welcome to News Sources, everyone. I am Julie Masiga.
Indeed, this is your home for absolute fair comment. As mentioned, a very newsy day from the Supreme Court all the way to a brewing battle and concentration between State House and Raila Odinga's team. Tonight,
the Supreme Court's five-judge bench is grappling with that big question. How do they walk away from the legal nightmare the judiciary seems to find itself locked in? Today, lawyers and senior counsel made passionate appeals to the Chief Justice. Which way, Chief Justice?
We are wasting time. We all attended law schools where elementary courses about mediation and so on. Mediation means that both parties have to agree. My old friend, Mr. Ahmed Nasir, in his usual aggressive way, he has made the position very clear of his client that the negotiations have failed. Then what are we wasting time for? What we need is now to be told when you can come back before your lordships and argue the preliminaries in this matter. We're just wasting time now. Mr. Mwite and...
We'll give the president of the Law Society a chance to meet the JSC. I convene the JSC, so you can meet the JSC tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. 2:30 p.m. We resume on Monday at 2:30 to either receive a settlement or to hear the applications.
So gentlemen and gentlemen, I being the only lady, it seems like institutions are falling like dominoes. We have the IEBC under fire, now we have the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the last resort when you're speaking courts in this country. What do we do when everything has been thrown into such a tailspin?
Well, certainly, perhaps we've got a first go.
Actually, I'd like to start by asking, what is it that someone wants to offer past age 70? Seriously. At this age, somebody just needs to go home, retire, enjoy your benefits. That's all. So right here, the two Supreme Court judges, they need to consider what is it that they have not offered. For the last time, they have been at the helm of justice, and now they want to offer Kenyans past age 70.
But that's a secondary question. The immediate question is, how do we walk away from this before we talk about the two judges and the issues at hand? How do we walk away from a seemingly situation whereby the law, everyone is on the right, as where it is now?
James, it's a complex situation. Complex situation in the sense that everyone is trying to run with the same law that everyone is trying to use to his own benefit. That's why it's a conflict of interest of sort, because the Judicial Service Commission, they made a ruling, and then this ruling is based on the law. Now the same judges are trying to base their argument on the law. So it's a whole complex of situation.
Milton, where do we go from here? What's the way out of this?
I think I want to start from where my brother was talking about, that really this whole problem can be solved by these two judges. And if you ask me, they just want to take us round and round, because the law is very clear. I've looked at some of the provisions that they are citing to premise their case before the courts, and to me it does not add up. To be honest, strict reading of Article 31 of the 6th schedule is very clear that you will only apply the provisions of the former constitution only to the extent that they are consistent to the new constitution. And one of the things is that if you are appointed to an office in the former constitution, then you will continue to serve in that office for the unexpired term. But then it gives a rider and says that application on existing offices is applicable with alterations, adaptations, qualifications, and that are inconsistent
It-
with this constitution.
it's
So I think it's a gone case. They just want to take us round in circles.
Actually,
It
Julie,
sounds very
Julie,
clear when Milton explains it, but these are legal minds who are arguing the finer points.
Julie,
So
this is
maybe
the
it's-
thing. This is what I think. The judges, they sought to protect the law of the land, the constitution. They sought to protect it. And as per the law, they're supposed to retire 70. But their premise is they were sworn in with the old constitution. But again, they're supposed to protect the constitution that we are. So if we go as per the argument that we go as per the old constitution, then it means anything that you did within the old constitution then should take precedence. I mean, the kind of precedence they are trying to set for this country is not right, and it should not be acceptable. The current constitution actually should take precedence.
But then let's look at it this way. These judges, they took oath of office according to this constitution. It is one of the provisions that were made under the transitional provisions.
They actually exist because of the new constitution.
That is the point. And the case of Lady Justice Kalpana Rawal, looking at it, the position of DCJ was not existing before this constitution. The Supreme Court was not in existence. So you cannot argue that she has a right to retire at 74 and continue serving under the former constitution. She was appointed as DCJ under this constitution, and therefore she's subject. It is very clear. The DCJ, Chief Justice, and all other judges will retire on attaining the age of 70 or at the end of their 10-year tenure, whichever is the earliest.
Fair point.
That is
fair
very
point,
clear.
Milton. But James, what does this mean for like the person walking on the streets in terms of credibility?
That's the question, because we can argue out the law from until cows come back home. But the question is, the Supreme Court and in fact the IEBC, part of the two institutions which were put in place specifically after the 2007 post-election violence, coming into the 2010 constitution, to give us confidence in our institutions. And these are institutions that, in fact, give us that basis on which we have confidence in our elections, and in our politics, and in our laws.
Actually, Julie, I even wonder what kind of ruling they are going to make, in the sense that the two Supreme Court judges, the Chief Justice and Smokin Wanjala, they represent Supreme Court in the Judicial Service Commission that made the decision, right?
Yes.
Now, it's alleged that after that decision was made, the other judges who are sitting on the five bench, the Jokindungu, Ojwang, and is it Ibrahim? Eh? It's alleged that they were on a go slow, meaning against the decision of the Judicial Service.
Let's throw this in the conversation. Hang on. So the age question seems to be the battleground for what the country has already figured out. That's the positioning and repositioning for the Chief Justice position. So while the legal arguments will be won or lost during the current hearings, the timeless and the timelines for choosing the next Chief Justice are fast approaching. So let's throw this in. As we going to discuss, who's in the right, who's in the wrong, and, and who's positioning for what, the Chief Justice is leaving office in a few days, maybe 15 days from now. Yep. And we are still grappling with how do we finish, a case that is in the Supreme Court that does not have a clear end in sight.
I think that explains why the Chief Justice is acting in the manner that he has, especially with regards to the appeal by the two judges. And he has gone ahead and said, because if he leaves office and this matter is not dispensed with, then the crisis is even more compounded, and this country will not have a judiciary, if you ask me. But beyond that, I think what we need to look at is the question of the Chief Justice has elected to retire. I think he is not 70 yet. He still has a bit of time, but he wants to do, something very clear.
I think that was clarified, that he had two sort of identifications, an ID card and a passport, and the ID card that he applied the job with ends on the 16th of June. So that's his, what was clarified.
Whichever way you look at it, that is typically Kenyan.
Yes.
Typically Kenyan. I wish Lady Justice Rawal and Justice Tunoi would follow that and say, guys, we've had enough time in the judiciary. So beyond that, I think what we need to look at is, could we have an opportunity where then this crisis is sorted out through arbitration. And I really salute the Chief Justice. He may have his own weaknesses, but on this, I think he has acted consistent with Article 73 of the Constitution that requires him, as a state officer, to act in public interest and in a manner that brings dignity and public confidence to the office that he owns.
Actually, before you comment, so do you think the noble thing for them to do is just to walk away?
The normal thing to do is not just for them to walk away. The normal thing to do is to uphold the decision of the Court of Appeal, which was they are supposed to go home at 7.
But honestly, did we?
That's the most honorable thing. Otherwise,
if it was so clear that they were supposed to go home at 7, then they would have gone home.
My honest view is we did not need any decision on this. The Constitution is very clear. Attain the age of 70 and
which Constitution?
Go home. The Constitution
the current
of
Constitution,
2010 or
actually,
the
current Constitution,
the preceding
2010,
Constitution.
The 2010 Constitution says they should retire at age 70. People went to court, they went to the High Court ruled in favor of the Constitution. They appealed the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal ruled in favor of the Constitution. Now, the most honorable thing to do for the two judges, Tonui and Rawal, is simply to let the Court of Appeal decision take.
So, but obviously they are not doing that. So there's an issue of contention. How do we get beyond?
I mean, we are already at the last end, the very last end of this treadmill, if you ask me. And I think maybe in the next few hours, a few days, we should have this sorted, because a decision of the Supreme Court cannot be appealed. And therefore, I see an end in sight, and the leadership offered by the CJ, in all fairness, I think will sort out this mess.
Nyakundi, without prejudice, I still feel that the decision of the High Court is not going to be really objective as such, because there's already conflict of interest. Okay,
of the High Court or the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court. There's already conflict of interest. And then somebody else has gone to court. Actually, they want that decision to be the appeal to be quashed, so that the Court of Appeal decision remains and stands.
Okay, break this down for just somebody who's listening and doesn't have any legal inclinations at all.
It's as simple as that.
What's
it
going
is
to
as
happen
simple
next?
as that.
Yes.
There are only 3 options. Okay, the Supreme Court can uphold the decision of the Appeal Court, or it can refer the matter back to the
High Court.
Court of Appeal or High Court for fresh, hearings, or just refuse to hear the matter on the grounds of jurisdiction and stuff like, or something like that. But the bottom line is, if you ask me, for the ordinary mwananchi out there, let's get this very clear. These guys, with all due respect to the 2 judges, they're simply taking us round and round in circles. They know what the end is. They're simply wasting Kenyans' time.
What's it take? Are they wasting Kenya's time?
My question to the 2 judges will be, what is it really they want to add value to the Supreme Court that they have not added?
People would argue that an older person is wiser and therefore can dispense.
But the Constitution, if we really value it, the former Constitution had put this retirement age for the judges at 74. But the Kenyan people, and they fully participated in the making of that Constitution, decided to reduce that age to 70. Let us not, try to belabor this point.
No, in as much as there's the letter of the law, as we said yesterday, there is the spirit of the law. So technically, should we just allow them to have their 4 years to reach some kind of compromise?
On the basis of what?
On the grounds that they applied for this job and got it, and they were in the system, and they were hired.
Let me ask you.
The previous
let me ask you.
on those grounds. So they have a point as well.
There are 2 questions here. There are 2 questions here.
They took oath of office on the basis of the 2010 Constitution, not the old Constitution.
And we know that. But beyond that, okay, let's take this scenario. Justice Kalpana Rawal appointed.
Before we carry on with that, just a brief moment so we can take this conversation a bit one step ahead, because the question begs, how did we get here? The simple answer is that 2 individuals, the Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal and Justice Philip Tunoi, are refusing to retire. But is that the whole story and the whole truth?
Yeah.
Maybe to continue on to that, I think the whole point is about the succession politics. Everybody knew when the CJ was appointed that he wasn't going to be there for long. No, he wasn't going to be there for the 10 years under the constitution, because by the time he was being appointed, I think he was 66. So all that, the whole succession battles began then. And without mentioning names, there are people, even within the Judicial Service Commission, that interviewed and recommended the appointment of Dr. Willy Mutunga. Some of them are actually already preparing themselves for that position. And that is what we are seeing, that you have individuals within the Supreme Court who feel that inherently they have a right to succeed the Chief Justice. And there are those on the other side, within the Court of Appeal, and those advocates who also feel that they have a right to succeed the Chief Justice, and that for me is really the whole story. I don't imagine that if the Chief Justice wasn't going to retire, was due to retire in the next 6 years, I don't think we were going to see Lady Justice Rawal and Tunoi in all this.
Fighting tooth and nail.
Actually, how I look at it is succession politics is really taking place here. You see, the Chief Justice is going home, right? He has decided he's going home. So he's the most likely person to sit in until the new Chief Justice comes in. The Deputy Chief Justice, who is one of the persons who is fighting to retire at 74. 74, rather.
74. So it boils down to succession, James.
Absolutely, and I think it went or starts just before this the jostling in the Supreme Court starts with the positioning into the JSC, all right, in the position that how many members the magistrates would have, how many would the High Court would have, and the Supreme Court, and that sort of thing, because that composition in the end is the interviewing panel for the next CJ. And that, I think the tinkering of that by the political class started the first jostling of the position for the CJ. So that is something that I think the Supreme Court or the judiciary is finding itself caught up in the politics of the day, and in that battle by someone or some people or a group of people trying to influence the appointment of the next CJ. So
I
politics.
think the flip side of this is that really maybe if Dr. Willy Mutunga was not 70 now, would still see the kind of jostling that we see in the Supreme Court, but its shape would be different, because when you look at the rest of the judges who sit in the Supreme Court, their ages, they would still have a bit more of time if we had 6 years to this succession story. But beyond that, my thinking is that it's not just what you have to look at is look at the composition of the Court of Appeal. You have to look at some of the senior judges within the High Court system, and you see where the problem all began. And I would go back and blame the Judicial Service Commission, which in appointing the successor to Nancy Baraza as the Deputy Chief Justice, they should have envisaged a situation where perhaps we could easily get into this kind of crisis.
Perhaps I mean, the Deputy
in that regard, if you ask me, suitability, again, is not just about credentials and being brilliant and all that. Suitability also goes beyond. What would be,
but that's assuming,
that's
assuming that no one would have thought, that position of a DCJ would actually, at the end, at some point, graduate into the position of CJ. So someone clearly thought about it and made sure that it is someone who's going to be disqualified at the end of the day.
But my point is to have a Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice who are age mates, if you ask me, is really precipitating a crisis. Yet we can do something about it.
No,
so, we could have done something about it.
At the time of these judges coming to office, actually, the Deputy Chief Justice was Nancy.
Yes.
Who was much younger, or rather is much younger.
I'm actually talking about when Nancy Baraza was removed from office.
That's what
in appointing her successor, we should have thought about it. Because if my memory doesn't fail me, Kalpana Rawal, Justice Kalpana Rawal, was among those interviewed before Nancy Baraza was appointed.
Not
If
true.
my memory hasn't failed me.
That's not true. We will have to, my redaction, that's not true. So your memory is failing you. And in that case, we move on to the next point.
I
And
put on a
Justice
disclaimer
Tunoi's
before
lawyer, Fred Ngatia, today insisted he will not cross-examine Judiciary Ombudsman Kennedy Bidali until the authenticity of a controversial NIS report is clarified.
He was to approach NIS, find out a very simple thing. Did they make this report or not? Because you remember, sir, I called off the bluff. I said all that the judge wants to know is this report from the intelligence service or not. Please, sir, don't try to pacify that position by saying that you will not rely on it. It's already been relied on. The judge is here before you today because the report was relied on very heavily by another body also appointed by the Constitution. And that body made a report to the appointing authority, and it used, amongst other things, the only corroborative evidence they got hold of was that report.
All right, that's where it is. So the whole question around the Tunoi's tribunal today is about that report. And that report says this, that the Chief Justice, having received an affidavit from Kiplagat, put the same affidavit across to the NIS, asking them to cross-examine. Did this gentleman, Kiplagat, had connection and any communication with the Chief Justice, with the judge? And the report, as it were, came with positive, saying, there has been some communications, and in fact, it's on that basis that the CJ, in fact, move forward, take the case, moving forward. That's where we are, ladies and gentlemen. You have a first word.
So now, Ngatia is questioning the authenticity of the report in court, yes? And he wants it to be certified as a true copy of the original, which is justified because that report is the basis on which Tunoi was charged. So do you think this is this a genuine legal argument, or are we trying to stall? Are we doing stalling tactics?
I think the learned friends, which I'm not anyway, I think the lawyers are really taking us in circles. The report has been already certified by intelligence agencies. Then the lawyer should just go ahead, I believe, and cross-examine on the basis of that, unless he wants to be served,
Actually,
which I believe he has been served with.
Actually, the NIS responded and did not either confirm or deny, more or less disowned that report in court. So how do we move forward?
But I think, again, taking us round and round in circles, because the Constitution is very clear that if there is an allegation against a judge at whatever level, but in this case the Supreme Court, the petition to the Chief Justice will be examined, analyzed, and on the basis of the allegations, on the strength of the allegations, the Chief Justice then goes ahead to form a tribunal, to recommend the formation of a tribunal to remove the judge. So what is the issue here? The issue is Justice Tunoi needs to prove his innocence. And the only way to do so is to cross-examine, to be able to unearth those lies wherever they are. So refusal to do that, how does that prove the innocence of a judge?
Well, it serves in this way, that the document, the one single document that the Chief Justice, the appointing authority, would have the confidence, right, of either dismissing or suspending the judge, was that NIS report, because there's absolutely no way the Chief Justice would have confirmed that Kiplagat and Justice Tunoi in fact know each other or they've communicated. So it had to be certified by another body, and that body happens to be the National Intelligence Service, who at this point are disowning that report.
But then, let's look at it this way. Were there any other parties involved in this verification process? Like, telecoms operators, perhaps confirming that there were conversations between this? Is that also in dispute?
Well, the NIS is in fact the ones who are given the entire documentation, and they go to the Safaricom's or the Airtel, whoever it is, and certify that in fact Nyakundi had a communication with Julie at certain time, and these are the nature of the conversation and whatnot. It's on that basis that the Chief Justice go to this JSC and say there is something here that seems to be afoot.
Precisely the point, and I am saying the only way, if you ask me, in my opinion, to get out of all this mess is to dismantle the facts based on that report, facts or lies. Just
At this
expose
point,
them.
you
And
cannot base anything on the report because
but-
it's not certified as a true copy
Julie,
of the original.
Julie, there are the other evidence that are being adduced in court.
True, but now
the
we've
other
come to
evidence.
a roadblock.
Now, the
I
lawyer
don't
here, the lawyer wants to rely only on one evidence.
But and the other bit is,
the two ombudsmen who have actually given a sworn affidavit to the essence that Kiplagat, yes, was seen in Tonuis.
But if the
beyond
very
that-
basis of the charges is being disowned by the authoring authority, the people who put it together,
Then we
Okay.
seem to we seem
Can-
to have a
can-
problem. Let's,
Can we ask ourselves this question?
well, before we ask ourselves, let's ask the people at Tweet Poll what for them to do. We ask them if you think the crisis in the Supreme Court can be solved by dialogue and arbitration. Do you think the crisis in the Supreme Court can be solved by dialogue and arbitration? You can always tweet us at KTN News, at James Smart, at Julie Masiga. We are happy to invite your comments on this topic. Now, you can ask ourselves in
No,
exactly
the question
10 seconds.
I was asking is, does it begin and end at the tribunal in terms of how you can prove the authenticity or otherwise of a document? I believe, Advocate Ngatia has all the experience, and within the law there are provisions in terms of compelling an institution of government or an individual to be able to produce that evidence.
All right.
Article 35, 2 and 3 of the Constitution are very clear. Move to court, yeah, you have the right to compel
Okay.
NIS to give that report or otherwise.
Absolutely. We need to take a short break
True
now.
enough.
You're watching News Sources. This is your home of absolute fair comment and, in fact, certifying things if they are true or not. We take a short break. We'll be right back. Don't go too far. All right, and welcome back to News Sources with me, James Smart, and Julie Masega, your home for context and absolute fair comments. We asked you on Twitter earlier on, do you think the crisis in the Supreme Court can be solved by either arbitration or dialogue? Do you think the crisis in the Supreme Court can be solved by dialogue or arbitration? Tweet us at KTN News, at James Smart, and Julie Masega. We are happy to hear your thoughts around this.
Now, the country will tomorrow embark on its routine National Prayer Day. Usually this day is when we see how godly our politicians are. But coming hot on the heels of rising political temperatures, can this day help in diffusing the tensions? Can it? Can prayer fix all our problems?
The question will be, as the previous prayer days helped?
And listen to the Premier.
Oh, sorry.
Ile ilikuwa ni ile kiboko baridi. Sasa mmesema tukubaliane mapema, na hii si vitisho, hatuweki kama sharti. Nataka tu manake huyu muda na yoyoma, naambia kujubilii wawache mambo ya mchezo ya paka na panya, wateue wakitimu yao, waanze mazungumzo na sisi, tuwache mambo ya Jumatatu. Lakini wakikataa, si mnajua dawa ya moto ni nini?
Seems I'm a very prayerful person. I wanted to jump into the prayers right away.
Absolutely. Right. So there we go. We again choosing to pray, over our national issues, and is God going to fix this?
James, praying is very good. Getting closer to God is the most important thing that any human being needs to do. But my question would be, as the previous prayer days helped, what essence will the politicians be? They are praying in the morning, and in the afternoon they are there exchanging unprintable words.
What difference does it make? As long as you're praying, praying is a good thing. And praying is to heal you of your past discretions.
But you
and
see, the
everything,
problem
so-
is these same people who want to pray for the country are the same people who are actually trying to pull the country further from God.
Let me begin from yesterday. We had a situation, and a few days before that, we had a situation where politicians want to use the quote-unquote prayers to settle scores with their colleagues, and that is really the tragedy, and that is the joke that we make of God. Prayer is good, prayer is all right, but I think sometimes, why are we doing this? Are we doing this because it is a routine that we started?
Milton,
or are we doing it because really there is a conviction deep down in our hearts that we need as a nation to go before our God to pray?
When you go to pray in church, in your heart there's a deep conviction, but me sitting next to you, I can't tell. So it could be that these politicians actually
That is
have
true, but why?
a close
Let me ask,
connection with God and they want him to help us.
Other than a group of about 200 or 300 politicians seated somewhere at some hotel over prayers, does it have a national face?
People pray every single Sunday in this country, and Fridays and other holy days. We are a very prayerful country, so we are all praying. So it
I
seems.
think precisely the point. Then should they just congregate in one room for that?
Because
Actually, this is my point. The politicians have turned prayers to be a mockery, in a sense. Why am I saying this? When you see them seated there and saying they're praying, when you read their body language, is totally speaking different from what they are trying to presume they're doing.
Atamba,
in
what
prayers.
qualifications do you have to read their body language and say that they're being hypocritical?
You can't say.
I must say that your faith in prayers in this panel is really, really awful, to say the least. We're very disappointed.
With all due respect, and I'm not trying to judge anyone, what I am saying is, and it takes me back to the late Mutula Kilonzo. He kept singing to us that we needed a national values policy so that we have a framework within which Article 10 can be actualized, but we do not have any. For example, we talk about dialogue as a national value, but we do not have a framework that guides that dialogue. We talk about, National Prayer Day, but within what framework does that happen? It is not
prayer
structured.
does not need a framework. Prayer is just something that you do
Then
to
why
better yourself.
why are we calling it an annual national prayer
Because
day?
we are all praying as a collective, which I believe is in keeping with very many different
We do it every day. So why is this one very special?
Because these are leaders. They're trying to lead us in the correct ways of doing things, and they must show. They must lead by example.
In other words, we don't pray when they don't tell
you
us.
pray individually,
No.
and then now we are praying collectively.
Collectively.
Together.
Could the church then lead that process?
Why does
For
why
the
must the
benefit
church
of
lead the
doubt,
process?
I'm a very strong Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
I'm a Christian, right?
All right.
Now, let's look at the past prayer days that they have had, or prayer events that have been organized by politicians. What do we see on the podium? They talk, and then a little, they divert from the prayers, they start abusing each other. Let's take, for example, in churches, and I wonder even why they are given space in church anyway. But I wonder, in church, instead of addressing the congregation on the basis of the biblical or beliefs, they start attacking each other from the podium of the church.
All right.
Then we want to believe the same people to lead the nation in prayers.
I get your point.
I think
I get your point.
everybody stick to their lanes.
Prayer
Stick
without
to your lanes.
prayer,
You're a politician,
prayer,
you're
hang on. Order the panel.
Pray without ceasing.
Prayer without action is dead.
Thank you.
Health workers in Mandera County are among 580 persons infected by the chikungunya virus. The mosquito-borne disease has infected 40 nurses, 4 doctors, and about 13 clinical officers, hampering treatment and management of the disease. Ladies and gentlemen, something's happening down in Mandera, and it's serious and it's big, right?
And
Yes.
It's very sad, really, that we are losing medics in our country. A few months after we celebrated our own medics for helping fight Ebola in West Africa. Really, for me, it is very sad that this is happening, and I think the ball is right in the court of the powers that be within the health establishment, the institutions, as it were, for them to be able to come out and explain to Kenyans how this happens.
One of the difficulties about this disease is that it's waterborne, so it's there because this particular mosquito has to bite an infected person, and then it incubates, in the water, then have to bite the next person. So it's something that if we had in this country, I believe, a society where we are all equals, we have running waters and a system whereby, people are Kenyans and there's no more Kenyans and others were less Kenyans, this disease, in fact, could not be a problem.
James, actually, it's a sad thing for the 21st century for a country like Kenya, for people to be dying from a virus like that. Then it also makes me more sad that despite the health being devolved, it's a national crisis. And just the other day, it was a group of Muslim doctors and nurses who actually said they're flying to Mandera to help their colleagues. It was not even an initiative by the national government, so to speak. I see now it gives room for the virus to spread very fast. And I think the national government needs to take this very serious. Despite the health being devolved, when it reaches a crisis like that, it needs to act.
But with health actually being devolved, isn't this the responsibility of the county to make sure that their medics are well enough to actually treat the rest of the population?
There's a point whereby even the county cannot handle. Like this crisis, actually, the county has not been able to handle.
So is that an indictment on county government?
But you see, that's why we have the national government to chip in where the county can't help.
And let's contextualize this. And I'm looking at it. We're talking about a waterborne, as it were, mosquito-borne virus, and it is killing people in Mandera. I mean, it's not in Kisumu. It is not happening in Mombasa. This is a semi or arid area. And for me, I think we are being careless as a country and we're having our priorities wrong. And if somebody would sit in Nairobi and say that is the work of Mandera County, then it is unfortunate.
But
because the bottom line
is it actually? Is it the county government because health is devolved, or is it the national government?
It is not. It does not just begin and end there. You just asked me about the spirit of the Constitution. And I mean, we've only devolved these functions. 3 years down the line, some of the things have not even taken off fully. So if you have an epidemic like this, and the national government would sit and say, we leave it to the county government, then it is really unfortunate.
And the question is
not doing
if
their
this
job.
was happening in Nairobi, and specifically Nairobi, in the affluent part of Nairobi, shouldn't the headlines be screaming, how deadly this disease is? Would we be all doing analysis, and screaming headlines and breaking news and all sort of things? Should have been what would have happened.
I'm more convinced that had it happened in Nairobi, in the affluent areas that you're talking about, I'm convinced it will have been contained by now. It will have been contained by now. So this brings in the gap of the poverty and the poor for yourselves and the rich for themselves. And that's the problem that we need to handle.
But you see, the people who have died, the lives that we've lost, the medics are not, quote unquote, the poor, really. That tells you that as human beings, we are all vulnerable. And as a country, we need to begin to look at each other with the worthiness as human beings.
Good point. But moving on from matters health, let's go to matters racism. Celebrated Kenyan author Binyavanga Wainaina has claimed he was beaten up by a taxi driver in Berlin, Germany, in what he says was a racist attack. Media outlets have been unable to confirm the attack, but nevertheless, there has been an outpouring of online support, even from Kenyans who previously attacked the writer for being gay. Are we being hypocritical?
Well, there we are. It's our very own, I think, and when something happens to our very own outside the borders, the way families can fight, but when they are, outside the house,
we're all one family.
We're all,
stand together.
Yeah, I mean, that's my perspective. I don't know what.
James, do you know I love Kenyans? Kenyans, when something happens outside that affects us, we are united. Actually, regardless, we don't even look who this person comes from, which tribe that we are. But if it was within Kenya, trust me, it could have been a different thing altogether.
So we are being hypocritical. Because on the one hand, we bashed him, or he's gay, or it's an African, and then suddenly he's an African.
No, he's Kenyan.
He's Kenyan, in fact, yes. So we're being hypocritical.
Yes and no. But I think if indeed it was an incident of racism, then it is very, very sad that it happened. And whether it is Binyavanga or it was some random African or a black from the US or the Caribbean, I think it deserves to be treated with such contempt and condemned as much as we can. But on the flip side of it, are we being hypocritical because this is one of our own and he's gay and we had all this drama? On the question of being gay, I have my own opinion. I do not agree with it, and if that was the context, then I would not support him. But
What
on
do you mean if that
racism,
was the
I
context?
think I would.
If somebody beats him up because he was gay, you would be fine with it?
I wouldn't be fine with it because, I mean, violence against a fellow human being, again, is not supported. I said I have my position on being gay, and I will not support him on that. But on any other thing that, contravenes his rights as a human being and fundamental freedoms, I think then we should be able to condemn that.
Well, interesting. I think the further conversation I've seen online is the white media not able to report this and casting doubt, of
On whether it actually happened.
incident actually happened, because say, well, someone being attacked in the streets of Berlin by a taxi driver, goes unreported completely, not from a blogger or whatever it is, forming that doubt. The flip side of that is, until the white media says something has happened, does that actually mean that it's happened? That, for them it might not be a story, but it's actually a story and it has happened.
James, when I read his first tweet in the morning, talking about how he has been attacked, actually said in the tweet, I'm being attacked right now. So I was wondering, is he being attacked as he's tweeting?
As taking a break.
Actually, I also wonder.
Are you casting doubt on this story? Just to be clear. It's okay. You have a space in this show to make your point and claim it.
Based on that tweet I read and the way I tried to interpret it, I had my doubts.
You had your doubts that he was actually attacked.
No.
Is that because anything to do with his sexual orientation?
Not really.
Why?
Okay, on the racial part, but we can't tell. Actually, we can't tell.
Do we have the context within which this happened? Because this is a taxi driver attacking Binyavanga in Berlin. What else do we know? If you are walking on the streets of Berlin and there's a racist attacking you, my imagination would it be a taxi driver really? Maybe there must have been an incident. Maybe he took the taxi and they had a confrontation and something like that happened.
Why must there have been an incident? Maybe it was just a purely racist
To be very honest, I've been to Germany, yes, and you're walking on the street. If a random attack would happen, naturally, it would not be a taxi driver. That is where I cast my doubts. But on the strict reading of racism in him being attacked, if indeed it happened like that, very unfortunate,
Julie,
and we should
Okay.
at this point, but he should tell us a bit more how it happened that a taxi
The problem
driver
with this story,
attacked him.
we have absolutely nothing. We have
That's why
no
actually-
idea
that's
about
why
the head or
else.
tails
That's
on
what
these
I
things.
say. There are two sides to a story, and sometimes they say there are three sides to a coin.
No, but
So at this point,
All right.
unless we get the
James
full
and
details,
Julie,
Let's get back to where we have actually, some evidence of things that are happening. And Nairobi Senator Mike Sonko spent his Madaraka Day at Kenyatta National Hospital. Pictures posted from his Twitter account show the senator with bundles of cash, explaining that he had spent the day in hospital paying fees for patients held by the hospital and healed but could not pay their dues. That's where we are. Good senator, would you say? Julie?
Well, on the face of it, it's a very good and generous gesture of him to do that for other people. But then again, where we are right now, heading into an election, everything is questionable.
But Sonko has been very consistent.
He
I'm going to defend him. He's been very consistent in helping the poor and, Sonko Rescue Team and all that stories. This is keeping up with this character.
I'd call it a long-term campaign.
Does the Sonko Rescue Team still exist? I thought
No,
he handed over that.
dismantled
But I've
it.
seen
I believe it
a
came back in
vehicle
some
there.
shape or form. Yeah.
I've seen a vehicle there written Sonko Rescue Team. But I mean, on being philanthropic, anybody can do that anytime. But again, politically speaking, and we've had some sentiments by some of his colleagues saying we all do these things, and we are not always on the media.
But that's
talking
a whole
about it.
lot of nonsense,
So
really.
which
colleagues, really?
No, I don't want to mention this because this is
Because Sonko
I don't want to make
Sonko has
allegations
owned
against someone
the
who
space
has
of
no right.
philanthropy in Nairobi.
But James,
Yeah, we had way. Anyway,
James,
make your point.
my senator, good work. However, I really would like to ask this question, and this is a societal question we need to ask. where does he get all this money? And we know what he earns. That is dishing right, left, and center.
He has businesses, he has things he does outside
No,
from
come
being a
on,
senator.
Julie, come on, Julie.
It's the truth, he does have businesses.
But do you think what he does, okay, no, let me not go deeper, but we really need to know where he gets all this money. Then second, people do it. Okay, there's a saying in Swahili which says, Tenda wema, nenda zako. Then let the people follow you.
To be honest, I think it is within the senator's right. I do not know the source of his money. I would be interested to know if indeed he can make that public or make that declaration, because as a public servant, it is required within the Public Officer Ethics Act and financial property provisions within the law.
What's fascinating is this,
declare,
right, that even the levels higher, the level of the deputy president, to mention that, would go and give monies in Harambes, and when asked, he says, I have friends and I can mobilize. There's absolutely nothing wrong in doing
that is precisely the point.
Right.
But I'm saying, it is a very thin line. It's a question of an egg and a chicken, because our people are suffering.
Bottom line, it is a good thing for him to do. Thank you very much. There are people who needed that kind of assistance.
That is what I was coming
Actually,
So
we are not trying to say that what he's doing is bad, but then we need to put some values to it.
Well, society doesn't eat values. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to the program. John, Julie, absolutely, we had great discussion and great fun. Don't go too far, because Linda Rukuti is up next with your brief of the day's events. This is News Sources.